Let's be honest about something most of us don't want to admit. You've been holding on to something that's been dead for months, maybe even years. And I'm not talking about that plant on your windowsill that you keep watering, even though it's clearly given up. I'm talking about the invisible things, the version of yourself that used to work but doesn't anymore. The relationship that feels more like a habit than a connection. The dream that's turned into a burden you carry around just because you invested so much time in it already. You know what I'm talking about, that thing that makes you feel heavy when you think about it, but you can't quite bring yourself to release it because letting go feels like giving up, like admitting defeat, like saying all that time, all that energy, all those sleepless nights meant nothing. But here's what nobody tells you about holding on. It's not loyalty. It's not commitment. It's not love. Most of the time, it's fear disguised as dedication. Fear of the unknown. Fear of starting over. Fear of disappointing people who've watched you struggle with the same thing for years. Fear of admitting that maybe, just maybe, you've been wrong about what you need. And I get it. Letting go is terrifying because it requires you to trust something you can't see yet. It asks you to release your grip on what feels solid, even if that solid thing is slowly crushing you, and step into space that feels empty and uncertain. Your whole system rebels against it because holding on is what kept you alive when you were younger, when you were more vulnerable, when you needed that control to survive. But you're not that person anymore. The strategies that protected you back then are now the very things preventing you from becoming who you're meant to be next. And the longer you hold on, the more exhausted you become because you're using all your energy to maintain something that wants to naturally dissolve. Think about the last time you held water in your cupped hands. The tighter you squeezed, the faster it slipped through your fingers. But when you relaxed your grip, when you stopped trying to control every drop, some of it stayed. Not because you forced it to, but because it wanted to be there. That's how life works too. The things meant for you don't require a death grip to stay. They flow with you, not against you. Most people spend their entire lives in a constant state of clenching their jaw when someone disagrees with them, clenching their fists when things don't go according to plan, clenching their heart when someone they love starts to change or grow in a direction that doesn't include them. And all that clenching, all that resistance, it creates a kind of internal traffic jam where nothing can move freely. You've probably felt it, that stagnant energy where every day feels like you're pushing against an invisible wall, where you're working harder but getting nowhere, where you're trying to force conversations, force connections, force outcomes that clearly don't want to happen. And instead of recognizing that the resistance itself is the message, you just push harder. But what if I told you that everything you've been struggling to hold together is actually asking to be released so something better can take its place? What if that job that's been draining you for months is clearing space for work that actually energizes you? What if that relationship that feels more like a negotiation than a partnership is making room for someone who loves you without requiring you to shrink yourself? What if that version of yourself that you've been desperately trying to maintain, the one that everyone expects you to be, is actually just a shell that's gotten too small for who you've become underneath? See, we've been taught that letting go is passive, weak, giving up. But that's not what real release looks like. Real release is the most active thing you can do. It's a conscious choice to stop feeding what's no longer alive. It's recognizing that your energy is precious, finite, and deserves to flow toward what's actually growing, not what's just surviving on life support. I remember talking to someone recently who'd been in the same job for 8 years, not because they loved it, not because it challenged them, but because it was familiar. Every Monday felt like walking into a prison they'd built for themselves, but they stayed because leaving felt too risky, too unknown. They'd created this elaborate story about loyalty, about not being a quitter, about how good employees stick it out through difficult times. But when we dug deeper, it wasn't about loyalty at all. It was about terror terror of discovering they weren't as valuable as they thought, terror of starting over at 35, terror of admitting to their family that the stable career they'd been bragging about was actually slowly killing their spirit. And the crazy part is, they knew. Deep down, they knew they were meant for something different. They could feel it in their body every time they walked into that building, the way their shoulders tensed, the way their breathing became shallow, the way they had to talk themselves through each day like they were preparing for battle. But knowing and doing are two completely different universes. Knowing is intellectual. Doing requires you to feel the fear and choose differently anyway. Doing requires you to disappoint some people. Doing requires you to admit that you've been living someone else's definition of success. Your body has been trying to tell you for months, maybe years, what needs to be released. That tightness in your chest when you think about certain people. That heaviness in your stomach when you imagine your future looking exactly like your present. That restless energy that keeps you awake at night, like some part of you is trying to escape, but doesn't know how. These aren't symptoms to medicate away or ignore. They're messengers, your inner wisdom, speaking in the only language it knows, trying to guide you toward what's actually aligned with who you're becoming. But most of us have gotten so good at overriding those signals that we've forgotten how to listen. We pop another antacid instead of asking why our stomach hurts. We pour another glass of wine instead of sitting with the discomfort that's trying to show us something important. We scroll through our phones instead of facing the silence where our deepest knowing lives. And meanwhile, life keeps knocking. Not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. Through opportunities that make you nervous, but excited. Through conversations that crack something open inside you. Through moments of unexpected clarity when you're driving alone or taking a shower. When your guard is down and truth has a chance to surface. But if your hands are full, if you're gripping so tightly to what you already have, you can't reach for what's trying to reach for you. And the universe, or life, or whatever you want to call it, it's patient, but it's not going to force you. It will keep offering, keep presenting possibilities. But at some point, if you're not available to receive them, they'll flow towards someone who is. The thing is, most people think letting go means losing something, but what if it actually means gaining access to everything you've been too busy to notice? What if letting go isn't about losing anything at all, but about finally making space for what's been waiting in the wings of your life this whole time? You see, nature doesn't hold on. Trees don't cling to their leaves when autumn comes. Rivers don't try to flow backward to stay in familiar territory. Flowers don't refuse to bloom because they're comfortable being buds. There's this natural intelligence in release, this understanding that holding on when it's time to let go isn't preservation, it's stagnation. But somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that our worth was measured by how tightly we could grip, how long we could endure, how much we could carry without breaking. We turned endurance into a virtue and release into failure, completely backwards from how life actually wants to move through us. I've watched people hold on to friendships that ended years ago, still checking their social media, still hoping for texts that never come, still making excuses for why someone who's clearly moved on just needs more time. They'll spend entire afternoons analyzing old conversations, looking for clues, trying to solve a puzzle that was never meant to be solved, because some people aren't meant to stay in your story forever. And that's not cruel. That's not rejection. That's just how life works. People come into your world to teach you something, to help you grow, to show you parts of yourself you didn't know existed. And then, when that exchange is complete, when you've both gotten what you needed from the connection, the natural flow is to release with gratitude, not to cling with desperation. But we panic. We make it mean something about our worthiness. We decide that if someone leaves, it must be because we weren't enough, weren't interesting enough, weren't valuable enough. So we chase. We try harder. We shrink ourselves to fit into spaces we've outgrown, hoping that if we just become small enough, quiet enough, undemanding enough, they'll want us back. And in that chasing, in that shrinking, We abandon the very person we were meant to become. We trade our expansion for their comfort. We sacrifice our growth for their familiarity. We betray our own evolution because we're terrified of being alone with who we're becoming. The same thing happens with old versions of ourselves. You know that person you were 5 years ago? The one who needed different things, believed different things, was afraid of different things. That person served a purpose. They got you through whatever you needed to get through. They developed the skills, the perspectives, the survival mechanisms that brought you to where you are now. But if you're still operating from that person's fears, still making decisions based on that person's limitations, still apologizing for taking up space the way that person did, you're living in a museum of your former self. You're preserving something that was never meant to be permanent. And the exhaustion you feel, that bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, that comes from the enormous energy it takes to maintain an identity that no longer fits. It's like wearing clothes 3 sizes too small and wondering why everything feels so constricting, why you can't breathe properly, why every movement feels forced and uncomfortable. Your soul is trying to expand, and you keep telling it to squeeze back into old patterns, old reactions, old ways of being that don't have room for who you've become. And that internal civil war, that's what's draining you. Not life itself, but the resistance to life's natural movement through you. There's this moment that happens right before breakthrough, right before everything shifts, where you have to choose. You can keep holding on to what feels safe but suffocating, or you can trust the unknown long enough to let your hands open. And in that opening, in that release, something miraculous happens. Space appears. Not empty space, not void, but fertile space, creative space, possibility space. The kind of space where new ideas can take root, where unexpected opportunities can find you, where the person you're becoming can finally have room to breathe. But you have to get comfortable with the gap, that strange, liminal time between who you were and who you're becoming. Most people can't handle it. They fill the space immediately with distractions, with busy work, with new versions of old patterns, because sitting in possibility without trying to control it feels too vulnerable. They'll end one relationship and immediately jump into another one instead of asking what they learned about themselves, what they want differently, what they're ready to give and receive now that they couldn't before. They'll leave one job and take the first offer that comes along instead of pausing to consider what kind of work would actually feed their soul, not just pay their bills. They're so afraid of the space between chapters that they never get to discover what the next chapter wants to be about. They just keep writing the same story over and over with different characters, different settings, but the same underlying patterns, the same core limitations, the same unconscious agreements with smallness. What would happen if you trusted the pause? What would happen if you let yourself exist in the question for a while without rushing toward an answer? What would happen if you stopped trying to figure out your next move and started paying attention to what's already trying to move through you? Because here's what I've noticed about people who learn to release with grace instead of resist with force. They start to develop this quality that's hard to describe, but impossible to miss. They become more present, more alive, more magnetic, not because they're trying to be, but because they're no longer using all their energy to maintain what's already dead. They stop performing their old personality and start embodying their actual essence. They stop trying to convince people to love the version of them that never felt quite right anyway. They stop making themselves available for situations that drain them and start showing up fully for experiences that feed them. And people notice, life notices. Opportunities that were invisible before suddenly become obvious. Connections that were impossible before suddenly feel effortless. Solutions that were elusive before suddenly seem simple. Not because the external world changed, but because they stopped broadcasting the signal of someone who's holding on for dear life and started emanating the frequency of someone who trusts life enough to let it move through them without micromanaging every detail. That trust, that willingness to release control, it's not passive. It's not giving up. It's the most active, conscious, powerful thing you can do. It's saying to life, to the universe, to whatever intelligence is orchestrating all of this, I'm ready for what's next. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to become who I'm meant to be, even if that person is different from who I thought I'd be. Even if that means disappointing some people. Even if that means walking away from what looks good on paper, but feels wrong in my body. Even if that means admitting I don't have all the answers and I'm willing to learn as I go. So here's what I want to know. What's the thing you've been holding on to that your body, your intuition, your deepest knowing has been asking you to release? What's the grip you've been maintaining that's actually preventing the very thing you want from flowing into your life? Because whatever it is, it's time. Not someday, when you feel ready, not when conditions are perfect, not when you've figured out exactly what comes next. Now, while you still have the energy to redirect toward what's actually alive, what's actually growing, what's actually calling you forward. The life you're meant to live is waiting on the other side of whatever you're afraid to let go of. Your hands are already starting to open, aren't they? Even just hearing these words, something in you is beginning to soften, beginning to recognize the weight you've been carrying that was never really yours to carry forever. That tightness in your chest, that heaviness you wake up with every morning, it doesn't have to be permanent. It was never meant to be permanent. The truth is, you already know what needs to be released. You've known for a while. That quiet voice that speaks up in the silence, that gentle nudge that comes when you're driving alone or lying awake at 3 a.m, that's not your fear talking. That's your wisdom. And it's been waiting so patiently for you to finally listen. Nothing gets better if you keep holding on to what's already gone. But everything changes the moment you trust enough to let your hands open. Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally making space for what's been trying to reach you all along. So take a breath, feel your shoulders drop. Notice where you've been clenching and let that soften too. Whatever it is you've been carrying, whatever you've been afraid to release, you don't have to figure out how to let go. You just have to stop holding on so tightly. Life will do the rest. Your next chapter is waiting, and it's going to be so much better than trying to rewrite the one that's already finished.